Welcome to the Mike White Podcast, where I, Mike White, share my conversations and book reviews through my journey to learn all that goes on in this amazing world. Buckle up and enjoy the ride.
Nothing on this podcast is financial advice. It's for educational and entertainment purposes only. With that, enjoy the show. All right, welcome to the Mike White Podcast. I'm here with Blake Roberson, one of the co-founders of the Bitcoin Sock Club. We met at the South by Southwest event in Austin, the Bitcoin Commons. We got these sweet socks that you can get every month if you go to his website and subscribe.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're about to launch some products on Amazon here in the probably next 2 weeks. So whether you prefer to shop directly from the website or Amazon to have the preferred the shipping. So
yeah, and I'll put all the links in the show notes for your Twitter and
awesome
website. And I saw you're on NOSTR as well.
I am on NOSTR. Yeah. On NOSTR, we've been on it for a while. When we first started, it didn't have the biggest audience. And so it's been a little slower for us to jump into, but Twitter's our main platform.
Yeah. It's crazy this last week when Twitter started limiting the people's, views.
Yeah.
600. Everyone started moving to Damus or NOSTR.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I can respect why Elon Musk decided to put a limit on it, because obviously he's trying to run a business and people are just scraping his data and competing with him on the AI front. It only makes sense. But obviously people want a free platform. So
yeah, and I think the Bitcoin solutions to getting rid of spammers and bots is a lot more exciting than just having that centrally planned kind of Twitter way. So we'll see what wins.
I completely agree. It's a free market. It's really interesting to see something that's so centralized directly compete with something that's completely decentralized. So
yeah, just like money, which we'll get to for sure.
Absolutely.
But I want to start off with your story. So the Bitcoin Sock Club, I have a lot of questions about just running the business in general, but I want to hear first your Bitcoin story. So how did you learn about Bitcoin?
Absolutely. What's interesting enough is my uncle, he's been in the finance world a lot longer than I have. He kind of introduced it to me. Obviously in 2016, 2017, that Christmas bull run was really fascinating. So he actually got myself and my sisters like a small amount of Bitcoin for Christmas. So
awesome.
Just watching it like a Christmas present that actually appreciates in value, it was really, really interesting. So essentially just having that introduction. I got to give a lot of credit to the crypto couple as well, because that's how he actually gave it to us for Christmas. Was we all woke up, came downstairs, and he had one of their episodes, or like one of their YouTube videos on the TV, and obviously it got me very interested, but it also got my sisters interested as well.
Yeah, if people haven't seen those videos, they're super high quality and they're well done. They're like music videos,
Absolutely.
Parodies.
I mean, that's their creativity mixed with their actual knowledge of Bitcoin it's awesome. It's really amazing. They build awesome, entertaining, very educating content. So recommend anybody that wants to get into Bitcoin, want to orange pill some friends or anything, they're a great resource to have an entertaining outlet.
Yeah. How did your uncle set you guys up with the Bitcoin? Was it just on an exchange, or did he even do the cold storage?
Yeah, so it was initially just through Coinbase. That was one requirement, was obviously set up your own Coinbase wallet, and whether you wanted to have your own cold wallet or if you just wanted an exchange, he would send it to the address.
Nice.
So I went Coinbase for a couple months, and then very shortly after got a ledger.
Awesome. So you initially see that number go up and it's exciting. You're like, yep. Oh, what is this? This is cool. Am I going to be rich? What made it stick after that? It crashed hard.
What was really interesting is it started crashing pretty hard. But I had already moved my coins into a cold wallet. So it was like I'd already committed. But I was a student at the time. So when I was just trying to have conversations with other students, I was in an entrepreneurial program there. What was really interesting is how awesome I found it. But when I actually tried to stretch outside my immediate boundaries and have conversations with strangers or classmates, nobody really had much of an idea. So it was, am I wrong here? Am I completely just going off the hard beaten path, or am I early? And I don't find myself as an early adopter. I think earlier than some, but it was really interesting because I think there's a lot of seeds planted. And initially having those conversations, I was like, decided I had to have been somewhat early. So I thought it was awesome.
Was it more like the fixed supply that got you really excited about it, or more like the decentralized type freedom money aspect?
I mean, everything was really interesting. Obviously, when you first jump into it, it's overwhelming with how much Bitcoin brings to the table, because it changes everything on a social impact, on a decentralized impact, it's a new form of money impact. And I what really made me interested in it is the new form of money. I thought it was really, really interesting. It was, owned by no one, accessible to everyone. And I thought that was really, really fascinating. Just the aspect of new money that can't really be controlled by the government.
And that's I think people, it's underrated when it comes to the Lightning Network right now, and being able to send just peer-to-peer transactions when everyone uses Venmo, or some people might use Cash App. But
Absolutely.
If you want to send to the other user, you have to have their same app. But Bitcoin is everywhere.
And that's the interoperability is really, really fascinating. I think Jack Mallers does an incredible job of really just spearheading that message, where it's going to be a fight for the best user experience, right? If I'm going to go out and build a Lightning wallet myself, I can use it and I can host it and I can send it to, if you're using Wallet of Satoshi or whatever Lightning wallet you're using, the ability to just open up and destroy those boundaries is really awesome.
Yeah, and you talk about Jack Mallers. He is definitely one of the most influential voices for me. I don't know about in your journey, what type of content did you like looking for?
When I first started, I tried to get every piece of content I possibly could. I immediately purchased the Bitcoin Standard. There's a few other obscure, like I got Layered Money, but there's a few like financial books that I got as well. But when it came to actual like digital content, Jack Mallers somehow always ended up, like I always ended up watching Jack Mallers. He's one of those people that can really just fire up an army.
Oh yeah.
He's so passionate. You can tell that he truly fights for what he believes in. And that's someone I want to get behind and help. Like I'm a Strike user as well. But obviously he wasn't a content creator. He was a business creator. So I watched a lot of Anthony Pompliano as well on the Pomp podcast. I think the first one I watched was him and Mark Cuban. And in the early days of Pomp, he always asked people their thoughts on Bitcoin. And it's really interesting to see someone even as big as Mark Cuban, like he obviously knew about it, but wasn't fully buying into Bitcoin back in, I guess this was like 2019 when he did that episode. And it's
cool to see Pomp. I don't listen to his, I've seen a few of his content, and it seems like he shifted from more of a cryptocurrency, like altcoins, or like everything kind of competitive. And now he's almost, I don't know if you want to call him a Bitcoin maxi, but he's definitely down pretty much the Bitcoin rabbit hole only, it seems like.
Absolutely. I mean, I think he was always pretty devoted to Bitcoin, but you can obviously tell in a lot of his content that he's pretty open-minded. Never seen him really just shut anything off unless it was incredibly obscure. But it seems like he definitely has way more focus strictly on Bitcoin now. Obviously, the guy's got a huge portfolio business. So the guy's incredibly smart, well-connected, and I just love absorbing his knowledge as well. He's very short and concise, asks great questions.
Yeah, I have a ton of respect for all those guys putting out content, doing the research, interviewing the people, and you just learn so much from podcasts, and you can do your daily life and have it in the background, just constantly learning. Pretty
Absolutely.
Cool.
It's really interesting because you find these people that devote their entire lives of building this educating content, and you get to essentially just share a little sliver of someone's expertise by just dialing in and listening to people's conversations and hear them explain their story, which is really awesome.
And Jack is starting a podcast now.
Yeah, he should release it here in the next couple of days, I think.
That's going to be exciting.
It's going to be really exciting. I think he chose a good interviewee or interviewer for the first podcast as well with Jack Dorsey. So I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, big time. So you were saying you're in college. You went to Texas A&M?
Texas A&M.
So what were you... Sorry, I can't say it. I'm not going to say... I'll say Hook'em, but I'm not going to say the other one.
Hey, it's all right. There's big rivalry between UT and A&M. Respect for both schools, but obviously I got to give it to A&M. One, I went there, and two, they're pushing harder on Bitcoin.
They are. I'll
than
give that
UT
to them.
is.
I'll give a gig 'em just for that, for your Bitcoin, for your Bitcoin adoption. But
Absolutely.
so what were you studying there?
Yeah, I studied communications with a minor in business. I did a lot more studying outside of class, like that, studying about Bitcoin or just business in general. Communications, awesome degree, but it didn't require as much focus. Like I didn't have to go to a library, an extra 40 hours a week or whatever it is to make sure I got A's and B's in my classes, which was awesome. So I can actually just read books or field my own studies.
How different was it, like if you had your communication assignment compared to if you're going home and sitting down and reading the Bitcoin Standard for an hour?
It was completely different, but the one really neat thing was in communications, they had a lot of business-oriented classes. Like there was digital communications or modern media, which gave us a lot of freedom to kind of pick and choose what we wanted to, tell our own stories about. So I essentially took a class that was about modern media and digital communications. So I essentially made a podcast, and a lot of my podcast was essentially bringing in my own personal studies and sharing it with the class. Obviously the classes were pretty small and there wasn't that much interest because not that many people were focused on Bitcoin then. But it was a lot different in regards to, I'm studying finance over here on the side versus I'm studying great orators from, the Greeks and whatnot. So it's two completely different things, but you can always find a connection somewhere when you're actually in the heat of studying and trying to build something. So
yeah, nowadays, in the Bitcoin community, everyone has a podcast. So those skills are super useful if you ever want to dip back into them.
Absolutely. Which, I have been thinking about starting a podcast. Bitcoin Sock Club is on the side. It's a side project right now, and I focus in e-commerce. So once I go full time in the Bitcoin realm, I will probably start a podcast in the next few months.
Well, have you ever heard of Gary Vaynerchuk?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's his thing. He says he thinks everyone should have a podcast just for marketing and like your personal brand.
I really like Gary Vee's perspective on a lot of things. Obviously, I respect his opinion and I respect where he sits on things. I'm not the biggest Ethereum fan, where he kind of puts more of his focus, but his actual professional and business life is really interesting because that's kind of where he made it. Like his family had a wine company and he's the one that brought it online. And I focus on e-commerce. So there's a lot of what he's done in his professional life and building a lot of, he has some massive successes. So I tend to tell a lot of his stories when I actually communicate with merchants, because I focus on large enterprise and e-commerce outside of that. So
yeah, and he works a lot B2B and B2C. He does everything, it seems
exactly.
like.
Yeah, he has a big Vaynerchuk media. So he does a lot of like his company focuses on digital marketing and social media and whatnot. So there's a lot of what he does that translates into what I do as well. So it's really interesting.
And even if he does deal with the shit coins, I don't think that's bad at all with his mindset. It's not just a pump and dump. It's not trying to like ICO tokens and then, rug everyone. He just wants collectibles. He wants digital collectibles. He sees that's the best route for him right now to do it. I don't know if it will be in the future or not, but we'll see.
I completely agree. I'm not going to go out and tell a bunch of people to invest in things I wouldn't personally invest in, but if he believes in it, obviously I'm not going to judge him and critique him. So yeah, I think he's very well intentional. Like he lives to be the best man he can. So I don't think he's ill intentioned. And like you said, he's not doing many pump and dumps or anything like that. So
yeah,
is what it is.
So if you're in college there and you're super excited about Bitcoin, and you're talking about it to all your friends, no one's really interested. Is that ever disheartening, or did you always maintain that kind of fire to keep going?
I think I've always been one to chase a challenge. So anytime my friends or people I didn't know are like, dude, like, come on, you got to focus on something new. Like it's down 50% in the past couple of months. I always found it more as a challenge to say, all right, well, like, how do I get this guy to at least understand my perspective now? And a lot of when I first jumped into it, I tell my friends, oh, you got to get some Bitcoin, which I wish they would have. But now I shift more of my focus on, hey, you need to pick up a book about about modern finance. You need to understand what is money. And then once you take at least 10 hours studying what Bitcoin is, I guarantee you're going to end up buying some. And I've taken that field. Like I've probably got 30 copies of the Bitcoin Standard at my house just because I just give them to my friends now, or just random strangers like, oh, Bitcoin, blah, blah, blah. Like, hey, just read this book. I guarantee you're going to want to buy some Bitcoin afterwards.
Yeah, I love the way Saifedean explains the economics. It's just, it's written so that everyone can read it, but it still hits on all the major points, and it's not like mailed in or too much of an overview. Like if you read the Bitcoin Standard, I think you will have a good understanding of why Bitcoin is so revolutionary.
Completely agree. And I think once people read it, they'll understand more about the history of money and how humans have, like, over time evolved their perception of what money is. Like rice stones. No one would picture a big stone sitting on a hill as money, but that's how people kept in track their wealth back in the day. So
yeah, so it evolves with time, and I think we're about that time where fiat needs to go, but we'll see.
I completely agree. I think what's really interesting to me is, like, as money evolves, I think we're going to see a huge shift in the perception of banking, right? These banks, I'm not necessarily saying they have a monopoly, but they do have a monopoly over finance. And there's been no competition. They're very content. And obviously there's a lot of regulations that kind of keep them in place. But as people evolve, they want either one, freedom money, two, they kind of want to step outside the boundaries because they're not politically inclined or aligned. But I think there's going to be a huge shift of people being their own banks.
Oh yeah,
in a sense. So.
It's going to be interesting. I still am not doubting there might be a time when fiat and Bitcoin coexist, because there is, maybe Lightning can't scale as fast as we still want fiat, but at least you have Bitcoin to hold fiat accountable.
Completely agree.
Like it reels them in a little bit. They can't just print a ton because you have that alternative.
I completely agree. And when you talk about the incentives and keeping people accountable, it completely reshifts how people can, manipulate finance. Once people have a secondary option, bankers and regulators have to really take a step back and say, oh shit, these people are more aligned to this alternative with Bitcoin and Lightning. How do we make sure we're doing the right thing? And I think the world needs a lot more of that.
Yeah. So, Bitcoin Stock Club, when did you start that? Yeah.
So, I've been wanting to jump into the Bitcoin ecosystem, for a while now. We had launched Bitcoin Stock Club. We started building it, talking to manufacturers, building designs, probably November of last year.
Oh, wow.
It's myself, I have a full-time job. My business partner has a full-time job, so it's been a little bit slower of a grind. But we launched early this year of 2023, and we're in the middle of revamping the website and really going hard on it now.
So I got like some business questions for you.
Yeah.
What's the first step? Like you have this idea. What do you do?
That's a great idea. One, for me, the first thing I did was go and buy bitcoinstockclub.com, and I was incredibly surprised that someone didn't actually have it. So for me, I just went, bought the domain, registered the LLC, and then started working out a game plan, like an actual business plan of, hey, if we start this, is it going to be profitable? And essentially, how do we maximize growth from absolutely nothing? So one, we built a business plan, reached out to some manufacturers and said, all right, this is going to cost XYZ to get this many socks to fill inventory. How many socks are we going to have to sell to, refill inventory 6 months from now, whatever it is. So one, get the very basics down, obviously register the business, start building a website, and then actually build a business plan to make sure you can sustain the growth.
Do you just Google sock manufacturers?
We did a lot of that. The interesting thing is one of my friends actually works in the apparel industry. He has an apparel brand. So we reached out to him with a lot of questions.
Nice.
One, he suggested going offshore, getting manufacturers from China. He introduced us to manufacturers in the US. So we kind of met in the middle. We ordered obviously half the inventory to test from China and then half the inventory from the US. So right now, about 75% of the inventory we have was manufactured here in the States, and then 25% was manufactured in China. But it was really just Googling, calling the right people, having conversations. So
Who's in charge of the design? Because you guys have like different designs and you
absolutely
change them and all
so
that.
Caden, who's my business partner, he's pretty creative. So he was in charge of the designs and ensuring that we can actually get good looking designs. But the most important part is once we have the designs, will it translate well in the socks? Like a lot of times designs will have like smaller B's, so they don't actually show up. And there were some trial and errors. We have about 100 socks that look absolutely horrible.
Ship them off to like Africa or something or whatever.
We don't know what we're going to do with them yet. They weren't a huge sunk cost, but I mean, I wear them occasionally because they're still comfortable. They just look terrible.
Yeah. I think that's the growing pains, right? I mean,
Yep.
I think every business you hear about starting out, nothing's going to go perfectly, but you just keep chugging along. It seems like that's the key.
Absolutely. And that's the one issue with having, like an apparel company. The biggest cost is inventory.
Mm-hmm.
And if something goes wrong, you kind of have to eat the costs. Either one, you eat it like we're doing, or two, you find some kind of secondary buyer to sell it for break even or even at a discount massively, so you don't just completely crush that cash flow. So,
Yeah. You're making really high quality socks too. Like
I appreciate that.
It's not cheap cotton.
That was the biggest thing we wanted is, all right, if we're going to get people that wants to go out and showcase Bitcoin and they're going to put these socks on, how do we keep them wearing? Like, they're going to put the socks on and say, damn, these are fucking comfy.
Yeah.
So we tested out a lot of different materials. Like there's 2 different socks there, like the long socks, I think they're 20, it's some mixture of polyester, comb cotton, and another material. But I appreciate that. We've put a really strong focus on the actual quality themselves.
No, for sure. I think that's it's very important too, because just like free t-shirts you get, if they do that for like advertising, I'm not going to wear the free t-shirt that is scratchy or itchy or boxy, but if they have a really high quality thing, I'll wear that all day. It's free advertising for those people.
Yes, sir. Yeah. That was one thing we also wanted to do is when we do giveaways, like you said, if someone gives out a scratchy t-shirt because they want you to wear their brand and it's scratchy and it's not comfy, they're not going to wear it. You just essentially paid for a t-shirt, gave it away to sit in someone's closet. That's doing no good. So it's one thing we really focus on as well was like the ankle socks are the ones we primarily give away, and they're incredibly comfy. You're wearing them now.
Right now. So what about so you got the logistics side down, you ask a lot of questions to people already in the industry. What about the website type technology stuff?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I focus in e-commerce. I've been doing it now for a little over 2 years. I help essentially large enterprises uncover common revenue gaps in their e-commerce and digital tech stacks. So I kind of have a background in what the technology needs. So we use a platform called BigCommerce. It's an incredibly powerful platform. You don't need to know how to code or program. So we essentially can pick a theme, drag and drop our pictures, text, but still have all the tools in the back end to make sure we can push our products to Amazon, to eBay, whatever it is, wherever we want to push our products, we can find a market to get them in with BigCommerce. So,
wow. So it kind of makes anyone a coder almost.
It can. It absolutely can. Essentially just allows you to focus on the revenue driving aspects of a business instead of having to worry about technicals or security. So that's kind of why we chose that platform.
Awesome. So you've been doing the Sock Club for a little over a year now. What are your big takeaways any lessons learned or?
Execution's everything. Execution's everything. You can build, you can sit with your business partner, get third party opinions, build up this whole game plan. But without execution, it's going nowhere. When we first started, it was really slow. We had like 1 or 2 subscribers, and it kind of hurts when you try to build something and you build out this big game plan and it's moving really, really slow. So you start to kind of lean off of it, especially if it's a side project. And then we had someone come in and order, I don't even know a massive order of socks, and it really just re-sparked it. And now we realize like, hey, execution's everything. That's the biggest lesson learned is once you build this game plan, build the step-by-step, you built the process to get it done, just execute on it.
Yeah. And you guys are doing this in a bear market too.
Absolutely. And that's
So
that's the beauty of it. So
I think you're going to have a lot more eyeballs in the space and a lot more people excited about Bitcoin here with the halving coming up. I'm a believer in the halving. I think just supply and demand, it's got to have some upward price action to it. What are your thoughts?
two things there. One, I'll start. I think it's awesome because it's a built-in marketing tool. Everyone's going to talk about this halving every 4 years, so it kind of gets the conversations rejamped up. But when it comes to the price action, like the supply and demand, it's the most basic form of economics. And when you cut the supply in half drastically, the adoption doesn't have to grow nearly as fast for the technology to actually work, the number to go up. So
Yeah.
it's really fascinating.
Do you have any price numbers guesses? Do you do that?
To be completely honest, I hardly look at price these
Yeah.
days. Obviously, when I see it on Twitter and whatnot, it's awesome. But I really like focusing more so on, Strike now has a competitor called River. River Financial, but now they're just rebranded to River, which is really cool. So I focus more on who's jumping into the space, and like what are these builders building. So it's really interesting to me. There's one thing that I've found really fascinating is when you find the brightest minds, and it's money, and when you find the intersection of the brightest minds and people with a lot of money, you can generally predict where the future's headed. And you're seeing a lot of people that really, really intelligent people moving from traditional financial jobs, people from Goldman Sachs, people from the New York Stock Exchange, moving over from their traditional finances or their traditional careers, jumping headfirst into Bitcoin, which is really fascinating.
And I think that is the healthy way to jump into the Bitcoin ecosystem is not look at price, look at it as a long-term savings vehicle.
Yep.
I'm going to continue to buy until I think right now my price, I would say 2 million. If it was over 2 million, I might hold off a little bit.
Yep.
But I'm just going to keep buying, and maybe, years down the road, we'll see what happens.
I completely agree. I think 2 million is absolutely doable without a doubt.
Oh yeah.
I don't know the time frame, but it's going to happen.
What's your favorite aspect of Bitcoin right now? You talked about Strike, you talked about all these companies. What excites you the most?
What really excites me is it's a borderless financial system. And it's really interesting that anybody can opt in. And the opt-in aspect of Bitcoin is what really, really fascinates me, because it's not like someone's over here pushing Bitcoin onto you and saying, hey, you got to use this, you got to use this. It's an opt-in system. And the fact that it's growing at the rate it's growing without borders or people telling you that you have to use this thing is really fascinating to me. There's so many people opting in.
And Strike, it's all these countries are included in the Strike platform, and it's so cool that they're just using Bitcoin as a settlement layer.
Yep.
So I can send dollars to the Philippines, and they get their pesos in their account, like a wire transfer, but better. And it's all done on the Lightning Network.
Completely agree. And it's really fascinating that you can essentially just leverage Bitcoin as a global liquidity pool. Like as you're exchanging US dollars for pesos, you need the rails to get the dollars to the Philippines and into pesos, and it's doing it instantly. And it's really fascinating.
Yeah. And people don't even know this. They're totally ambivalent. Like no one knows what's going on.
It's really fascinating, and it's really surprising that I think the seeds are being planted. I think people are starting to hear about it. I mean, most people have heard people have heard Bitcoin. They've at least heard the name Bitcoin. And I think the seeds are planted. It just takes a little bit of watering for these roots to kick in.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm bullish.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to cover on your sock thing? I got some Bitcoin questions for you, but I don't know if you want to talk about the sock club.
Yeah,
anymore.
I mean, it's Bitcoin Sock Club, essentially 2 pairs of socks shipped to your door every month. And they're random designs that we do have. Caden's an in-house artist, so the designs are always fun, and the socks are always comfortable.
I got a proposal. I don't know if this is legal or like what the copyright things are, but did you see the Greenpeace energy skull?
Yeah.
That would be pretty cool on some socks.
On some socks. Yeah. We actually talked about that. We have a lot of designs that we're about to ship, that we're about to send over to our manufacturer. And that's one of them is the green skull. What
do you say to someone that says, oh, that's really cool, but Bitcoin uses so much energy?
It's a really good question. And it's hard to fight back on without having all the numbers to back it up. But when the energy is being used for something good, it's hard to argue with. And one, I also think the Bitcoin network is leveraging energy that otherwise wouldn't be used. Like a lot of people, like the flared gas, or a lot of these windmills or solar farms. A lot of times these, like the green energy that's being produced is getting pumped right back into the ground. So we're essentially picking up the slack where the traditional markets and the traditional economy is not really picking it up. So I think we're harnessing the green energy, and we're actually using it, one, for good, and two, we're making these green investments more well capitalized. So we're pushing green energy faster.
Yeah, the effect it could have on energy. Have you heard of the is it gridless too? What they're doing in Africa or those like less developed cities where it's not economical to put a power plant there.
Yep.
But they can make it economical, like if there's a river, and mine Bitcoin. So
Absolutely.
even if the residents aren't using electricity right now, if you start mining Bitcoin and then people can start buying their electronics, they have something to charge it with.
Exactly. And I think I've heard a little bit. I think I've read one or two articles. But what's really interesting is if there is any excess energy that's not being used, could get pushed into the local communities. And they got to start somewhere. Like there's got to be a foundation somewhere for these communities to thrive. And Bitcoin's making it a lot easier for a lot of these communities to thrive.
Yeah. And the other thing with energy that scares me is like, so you're saying the government can say what I can use energy on, and it can dictate, oh, that's not a moral use of energy, so you can't do that, but you can do this. That if we start going down that route, that's dystopian.
Completely agree. Once you open the doors, it's pretty hard to close them or turn back and walk back through once the government opens them up. So
yeah. All right. Not your keys, not your coins. Why is that important?
I think it's incredibly important. I think we saw a lot of real life examples of what that means with FTX and all the other exchanges that exploded. Not your keys, not your coins. So if you're going to buy into Bitcoin and really learn about it and adapt into this freedom money, I think owning your own keys is incredibly important. Obviously, the first step is probably buying on an exchange, researching. I think the number go up philosophy and technology is really what drives a lot of the adoption. People come to get rich, stay for the movement. So I think once they start transitioning to, hey, I'm staying because this is really changing the world, that's when people start to actually own their own keys and understand Bitcoin for what it is.
Yeah, and you would have been fine in Coinbase, but there's so many other exchanges that have gone down since you've just been in Bitcoin yourself.
Yep.
That if you had your Bitcoin on those exchanges, it had been gone, like Celsius, BlockFi, FTX.
Completely agree. And I also I like to be a numbers guy. And when people are looking at like, oh, so many wallets holding, 1 Bitcoin or 2 Bitcoin or 0.1, but a huge number is like how many coins are actually on exchanges. Because I think that's showing the true adoption curve is people are buying Bitcoin, but now they're actually understanding it and they're putting it in their own self-custody and owning their own keys. So just seeing keys coming off exchanges is the adoption rate I like to look at.
Yeah, I never even thought of that. Because that's if you take the effort to move it off the exchange, you somewhat understand Bitcoin. You have to. Exactly.
And you're investing, like you have to go out and actually spend money on a hardware wallet. So one, you're you're investing in yourself at that point outside of just trying to hold Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Which is really fascinating to me.
And just think of like the liquidity of the trading liquidity. Those people that hold it in cold storage aren't the day traders.
Completely agree.
So the less and less on exchanges, I think, I mean, not that it matters, but price action probably going to go up.
I completely agree. Yeah, I mean, once you remove that sell pressure, Bitcoin it's just a volleyball being held underwater right now.
Yeah.
It's slowly about to go the opposite direction.
That's a good analogy. All right, last Bitcoin topic. Bitcoin and nutrition. What do you think of this whole movement of you go on Bitcoin Twitter and there's either one day there's stainless steel versus cast iron argument. There's everyone eating beef. What's going on there?
I find it really interesting. I primarily eat steak, so it was awesome to just be reassured. I'm not a nutritionist by any means, but there's been a lot of really interesting stories where people focus a lot of their diet on only eating red meat, and it was really interesting to see the change and what people had to say about it. So I decided one day, I was like, I'm just gonna try it, see what it's like. And for me, like when I actually made that transition, it was easier to wake up in the morning. Like I was not tired throughout the day. Like I still drank coffee, but I'd never had like the caffeine crash. Felt a little bit more sharp, but I think it's really important. One, obviously you want to be more healthy, but two, I think it's really interesting that this community is at least bringing that conversation to the table. Like people do need to focus on their health and the nutrition and what they eat. And regardless of what side you fall into, whether you're on a carnivore diet and you only eat red meat, or you're vegetarian, but at least having the conversations and shining the light on the importance of it is the most critical aspect of it. I think it's really awesome that people are out there having public debate and creating that conversation.
Yeah, and I think too often they get labeled as conspiracy theorists if you go anything separate than what the traditional narrative is.
Yep.
But I don't see Bitcoiners as conspiracy theorists. Do you?
No, I think I see them as just like rule breakers, and without people breaking rules, it's hard to grow. Yeah,
they preach, like in the Navy, the worst explanation for something is, oh, it's always been done that way.
Exactly.
Like if that's your reasoning for something, you have to really like stop and question, okay, what's really going on here?
Absolutely.
And that's all I think the Bitcoiners are wanting to do. They want to have this discussion, debate, have principled reasons. Okay, why are we doing this? Do we need 11 servings of grain every day? Like, does this make sense?
Absolutely. And it's really interesting to see people, like if you look back, the food pyramid, like a lot of it has recently just been proven wrong. Like they were, hey, this is the way you're supposed to eat your diet and focus on X, Y, Z. And now we're realizing that carbs aren't that great, but they said it was an essential piece of our diet. So I completely agree. I think accountability, like you said at the beginning of the conversation, is really important. So I think Bitcoiners are really just trying to create a new sense of accountability on all kinds of fronts, which is incredibly important. So
no, it's exciting. I hope people, maybe after this episode, they read this, they go buy a steak, get the Bitcoin standard, buy some Bitcoin, get some socks. It's a good feeling to support the community that's doing so much and has so much opportunity.
I completely agree. I think when people are trying to create change and create a movement, obviously you want leaders that have the passion to build an army behind them, and they're going to be at the front of the army spearheading whatever change they're driving. And a lot of Bitcoiners have that characteristic and have that personality to have an army jump behind them and actually spearhead the change. That's why I think Bitcoin's so inevitable, is the people behind it and the technology that they're building as well. So
yeah, Bitcoin will win.
Bitcoin will win. It's hard money, and it's really hard to fight. Yeah.
All right, Blake. Well, I appreciate you coming up here and doing the in-person podcast. I like these a lot better than over Zoom.
Completely agree. I think I do appreciate you having me on. It's been a pleasure, and always love talking about Bitcoin.
You got any final thoughts, or are you ready to close it out?
Bitcoin, it's harder, faster, stronger.
I love it.
Jump on the boat.
I'll copy Odell and stay humble, stack sats, guys.
Absolutely. Stay humble and stack sats. Most important thing.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to the Mike White Podcast. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Mike White Pod, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Y'all have a great day.